It looks like we are live, guys. But first of all, let me just shout out the two gentlemen that we have here. We have the former United States Senate candidate and CEO and entrepreneur himself, Mr. Eddie Mauro. And we have the man with the plan, the man who does everything, literally everything, our good friend, uh, the chairman himself, Mr. Al Wumpa. And I'm Rob Johnson. I'm smiling, you all, because if I don't smile, I'll start crying. I'm smiling because today was a hard day. And I am choosing to believe that this will get better. So I'm going to smile because in order for me as a black man to continue to believe and have faith that we will get through this, I have to smile. And so I want to welcome you to No Justice, No Peace Pact. We're here today because we're going to talk about how we feel about what is happening in our country, what is happening all over right now. It seems like it's a 1-2 punch. First, then it was Breonna Taylor. Then it was George Floyd. And we spent an entire summer protesting and calling for justice, still for somebody to turn around and shoot another unarmed black man. But we're not just talking about Jacob Blake. We're talking about Trayford Purnell. We're talking about Anthony McClain and countless of others whose names we may not even know, but whose families are struggling right now to process what is happening. So I welcome our two guys with us, Eddie and Al, and we're just going to have this conversation. And Eddie, I want to toss it to you first, just from an outside perspective, because I know that you sympathize with what we're going through and what is happening right now. So from an outside perspective, looking at this situation, what are your thoughts?
So my first thought, Al, is exasperation, in that and a thought of helplessness. And part of the helplessness is that I can't feel what black men and women feel. And I don't know if there's some guilt that goes along with that, because I'm trying to look from my eyes, and even though I try to walk in the shoes of others and experience that, I can't do that in a meaningful, practical way because of what I look like. So I'm exasperated by the repeated acts. I'm frustrated and got a feel of helplessness, and that I can't fully realize and understand. And I don't know if I need to. I can identify injustice when I see it, whether that's happening, whether that's happening to black people or women or the LGBTQ community, which caused me to want to go find No Justice, No Peace, and put this team together for you to go out and help her lead the way that you can lead, and how to do the work that he can do, and us to build this team out. And the other thing that I just want to quickly say is we want to do that. We want to do that from the inside out. We want to do that from white middle America to grow this kind of movement. To look at the Kenoshas and the Minneapolises and the Des Moines of the world. And how do we fix justice here and then grow that out to the outer parts of this country? So my initial thoughts. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Brother Al, I'll toss it to you. I know today has been a kind of a rough day,
Mm-hmm.
and huge shout out to people like Luana who are providing mental health services, because on days like today, people don't understand that your black friends are not okay.
Mm-hmm.
That the PTSD from seeing someone that looks like you being gunned down in the street for absolutely no reason, I know it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
So wanted wanted to just toss it to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, when it comes to no justice, no peace, one of the things I said to somebody is, unlike, political campaigns or other things that, may be out there, we are not going anywhere. We are here to work through the political season and the elections, and then we are also going to be here afterwards to make sure that we are holding elected officials accountable, that we are reviewing the policies that people are pursuing, and that we are consistently looking to make sure that we are working on those inequities that affect the Black community and people of color. But, I really was affected by the recent shooting of Jacob Blake and the violence that happened after that, for the simple reason that there were so many people, that joined in different protests and different marches and different events throughout the state of Iowa and then throughout the United States. A lot of these different events were led by, the youth of our community, who worked extremely hard and put on a pace of events that was absolutely astounding. They worked very hard. And we had, our Black Legislative Caucus here in the state of Iowa push through some legislation, in a matter of a couple days that, had them working without any sleep, had them working without any rest, had them working extremely hard to be able to push this through. And I felt like we were turning a corner. And yet the actions of one officer who did the wrong thing and shot a man in the back in front of his children when he was trying to break up a fight, it feels like it set everything back so very, very far. And it was disturbing to me that so many people who had such hope and such great thoughts about where we were leading to were then, affected by this one man and his actions. And then, unfortunately, a couple nights later, we had another young man who, misguided and angry, came forth with a rifle and shot at unarmed people, taking the lives of two individuals and injuring a third. And that's where I have to reach forward with my concern for everybody out there who is involved in these protests, these marches, and these events. Am I going to see, friends and loved ones wind up getting shot or getting hurt? And people maybe sometimes don't understand the frustration and the anger. I'm not a person who, if you look right behind me, you're going to see a sign that says peace. I believe in peace, and it is definitely a part of who I am and my personality. So when it came to some of the violence that we saw with some of those early protests within Kenosha, I didn't like it. It disturbed me. But at the same point in time, I understand the frustration that it comes from, because people had seen so much death. They had seen so many people hurt, and they felt that this had gone beyond. And then suddenly here it rises its ugly head again to now cripple a man for the rest of his life. And they don't understand the frustration that boiled over in that, because you really have to understand what people are facing is that can happen to me at any time. That I'm no longer seen as a human being by certain individuals. I'm just an animal. I'm a problem to be dealt with, and not recognizing my humanity and having that respect for all humanity that we should all have, and finding that there is another way that this particular problem could be dealt with and solved rather than shooting somebody. And for those who are upset by the violence that happened with some of the protests, I understand you. But I have to tell you this. Are you that upset as well at the killing of an unarmed man? Or the crippling of an unarmed man shot by police? Because that should be the first thing. If we don't address that this has happened, and we don't address that that's why some of these people broke out with such violence and anger over a summer that led with so many great protests and events happening, then you're not truly understanding the trauma that these people have faced. They've seen it again and again. They felt hope. They felt that something was going to change. And then again, they see the same thing happening again. And to respond to that with more violence, by shooting and killing people, by vigilantes with guns, is not going to solve anything. It's only going to raise more fear, more anger. We're better than this as a people. I love this country. I love my community. I love my state. And I don't want to see this kind of thing continue. So I really hope that people bring from this that there's got to be a better way to respond to these particular incidents. And we have to finally say that there has to be justice for people like Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and for Jacob Blake. Because if that justice does not come, if that equality that we all are hoping for under society does not come, then we can't see the peace that we truly want. And I don't just mean physical peace, I mean mental peace. Because without that mental peace that we all hope for, we can't see peace in our streets.
That's pretty good, Al. You know, I got to comment on just a couple of things because I see on social media and chatter from people that look like me, who kind of think a little bit differently. You know, some arguments that they're making, and gotta love them that they're making them. Everybody should be able to voice their opinions. And one of them is condemning the protest and the riots. And you mentioned, you know, and they're looking for law enforcement to even come out and be stronger about that. I don't think people understand, you know, the history of that, of the riot. And I went back and grabbed a quote from Martin Luther King, and I wanted to just read it really quick to everybody because it'll give us a little bit of context. He says, I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn the riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America's failed to hear, he asked? It has failed to hear that the plight of the black poor has worsened over the last years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met, Al. And has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And you're hearing that play out today, Al, when you're hearing everybody talk about, you know, protecting the suburbs, right? And that if we elect a certain person here in November, that the suburbs are going to be under threat, your tranquility could be under threat. And so in a real sense, Martin Luther King said, our nation's summers of riots, which we're all experiencing this year, are caused by our nation's winters of delay. We've had endless winters of delay for years and years. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. Let me say that again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. It's not National Guards people. It's not federal troops. It's not more law enforcement. It is social justice and progress that needs to be made in order for us to bring about the peace and justice that has brought us together to form no justice and no peace. So I hear you. And before you jump back on, Rob, I'm just sharing some of the things I'm hearing in chatter from people who look like me. that are kind of exasperated as I am about the injustice among people of color. They're exasperated about the riots and the lawlessness in the streets. And I think we need to have a deeper thought about what causes the riot.
There can truly be no peace if there is no justice. There cannot be peace if there is no justice. Those two go hand in hand. If you provide justice for people, if you give people justice. So the question is, what does justice look like? Justice looks like a fair criminal justice system where black bodies are not sentenced 9 times greater than their white counterparts. What does justice look like, Eddie? Justice looks like black women going to the hospital and their pain being taken serious, and that they're not losing their babies 4 times greater than their white counterparts. What does justice look like? What does justice look like, Al? Justice looks like us being able to stand up and protest without some white vigilante deciding to show up with a gun and shoot 2 people and kill them and wound another. Justice looks like that if a black man was walking down the street, like you said earlier, Eddie, with the same rifle, with the same clothes on, that the police wouldn't have just rolled past him. The police wouldn't have just allowed him to get in his car and drive across state line and go home like nothing had even happened. That man would have been prosecuted. That man would have been arrested, or worse, that man would have been shot himself. So justice has to run deep. Justice has to reign. And black people are tired. We're tired of sitting up here talking about all of the stuff that is being done to us. You know, you have, for every 1 black male in the country, there is almost 3 or 4 white males. But yet, black men are killed twice as many times than their white counterparts. And they're sentenced to prison more often than their white counterpart, given longer and tougher sentences than their white counterparts.
You know, when you find out what justice truly is, when you want to find out what equity truly is, you do not ask the powerful. You do not ask the politicians. You do not ask the police. You do not ask our military leaders. But you ask those who are powerless in your society. You ask those who are standing on the edge of their society. That's how you find out what justice truly is and what equity truly is. You know, to me, equity is when the game is called the same for everyone who is playing. You know, being a former football player myself, you know, I've often seen when there are arguments or there are, you know, very disparaging remarks were made about how a game is called because we feel it is being called unfairly for one team as opposed to the other. It really is blind. It is supposed to be. It is supposed to be where any of us step into that arena, we all know that we are going to be treated the same way, but we know that that is not true. And for those who deny that, it is because they are sitting in a position of comfort. They're not sitting in a position of want. They're not sitting in a position of fear. They're not sitting in a position of depression. They're sitting in a comfortable life that this system has benefited them. And so when we talk about things like racism isn't just the fact, well, I have never said, you know, certain things. I have never done certain things. But do you understand and do you recognize the inequality in which plagues our society? And more importantly, when you see it, do you call it out? If you do not call it out, how do I know you're not a racist? If I'm sitting amongst a group of coworkers and somebody makes a comment and none of them stand up and say, that was wrong. Don't say that. You need to apologize, and those attitudes and feelings and opinions are not welcome here. Then as the person who has been on the other side of that, of those particular racist comments, How do I know that all of you are not racist if you do not stand up? So it has to be a struggle that all of us take. Now, it will be uncomfortable. It can be intimidating. But at the same point in time, nothing worthwhile has been safe and unchallenging in the whole history of humanity. And I think that that is something we have to look at. I look at the fact that, when we look at ways that we try to improve our lives to get better, whether it be going to school or working out or trying to get a better job, all of those things are challenging. All of those great problems. But in the end, we can be in a better way. And here we have to look at the same thing when it comes to racial and social justice in our country. You may have to have some uncomfortable conversations, and you may have to come to some uncomfortable realizations about yourself and what you do. But at the same time, when you do that, you're going to lead to a better place. And that's where we all have to be.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, I'm hearing from some chatter from some folks, and I think we need to have these conversations. I think we need to listen and hear the questions and answer them. Because if not, then we just stay in our silos and we're not going to be able to figure some of these things out. So one of the questions that's been asked, one of the comments that's been made relative to Jacob Blake and others is if he would have listened to law enforcement, then maybe this wouldn't happen. How do you react to that?
Listen, I saw a meme, and I hate to act like memes is like, so philosophical, but let me say this. Guilty people don't deserve to be gunned down. Innocent people don't deserve to be gunned down. And I see all the time where people say, if he would just comply, if he would have just did what the officer asked him to do, he would still be alive. To me, that's problematic. Because at the end of the day, I have unalienable rights that was granted to me according to our Declaration of Independence, that was granted to me for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The narrative is never, oh, if he would have just complied. So what do you say to those who do comply and still get treated like an animal? Still get dogged out, shot, killed, destroyed, trampled on, oppressed. If he would have complied, what? Like the whole mindset of that to me is problematic.
But
So if I
mindset,
do
Ron.
like I'm told, so you're telling me if I do like I'm told, I can just I should be able to save my life. So my life is on the line. My life is on the line because somebody felt like I did not comply. Because somebody felt like I did not do what they asked me to do, even though they showed up to the scene, unaware of what was happening. There are countless of cases and countless of times. I just watched a video where the police showed up. A lady called, and they pulled their guns on two little black boys. And the lady said, "Yo, y'all got the wrong guys. Y'all got the wrong one. These aren't even the guys I called the police on. Those are the guys." And they had their guns drawn to these kids' hands. They complied. And now they're living with all of this trauma, even after complying.
How?
But to add one thing to that, when we talk about whether you complied, whether you have not, it brings me back to something that I saw in Florida several years ago, where there was a young man who was a caretaker at a special needs facility, and one of the individuals that he was caring for ran out of the facility, and he ran after him. And at one point in time, when the video picks up, you see this man lying on the ground with his hands out, face down. He's not moving. He's not doing anything. And you see his special needs patient only a few yards from him. And at one point in time, as he is laying there on the ground, his hands outstretched, nothing in them whatsoever, He is shot by an officer. And when
Wow.
the young man who was shot yells, "Why did you shoot me?" the officer says, "I don't know." Compliance is not a guarantee that you will not have your life in danger. And I also will say this. My good friend, Wanda Nelson Brown, has taught me something very special, that when it comes to trauma, trauma is not just what happens to that one particular person. Trauma can be transferred throughout a society. So when you see people who look like you, or your uncles, your aunts, your brothers, your sisters, violated by the police, that is a traumatic.
Continually.
And so when you sit there and you see that, you don't necessarily have that same trust and faith in the police force that other people do who are sitting in comfortable suburbs in places like I live here in West Des Moines. You see people who, when they see the cops, they see a threat. And so when we talk about their compliance, their willingness to do what they want to do, or their willingness to do what the cops are telling them to do, excuse me, you are seeing the people who may not act like people who are sitting in comfortable houses and in comfortable neighborhoods. You see people who are affected by the trauma that they have seen in their neighborhoods. And they only understand that I am in a dangerous situation because the police to me are not friends. The police to me are individuals who are possibly going to react violent to me no matter what I do. And we have to understand that that trauma informs some people's lives. It shapes their lives.
Hey,
You know,
Al, let's not.
yeah.
Hey, Al, let's not forget that the weaponization of black skin was used on a bird watcher named Chris,
That's right.
because this woman knew. Let me
Mhm.
be clear on this for those who are watching. I want you to make sure you see me. This woman knew that by calling the police and claiming that she, as a white woman, was being violently attacked by a black male, the
Mhm.
response that the police would have against him. And she used that as a weapon against him. I'm advocating, and I've been advocating, she should have been charged with attempted murder. She should have been charged with attempted murder because she knew exactly what she was trying to have done. Because
Mhm.
she was asking for what happened to George Floyd to happen to that bird watcher named Chris. That's what she was asking for. And if you, and I know there's probably going to be some folks who jump on here and she felt threatened and all of this crap. Man, I ain't trying to hear. She knew exactly what she was doing. If you watch the tone, if you watch that full video, she says, "I'm going to call the police and tell them I'm being attacked by a black man and I'm a white woman."
Mhm.
Right there, she said to him, "Bow down and do like I'm asking you to do and leave me alone. Because if you don't, I know somebody who will take your life because I simply
Mhm.
called them."
And that's
This is America.
every day. Every day I have to question, will I be next? Will I, my family, my loved ones, will I, the great Reverend Rob Johnson, Representative Akeo Abdul Samad, will any of the people that I truly care about suddenly be in danger because somebody has decided that we are a threat to them, whether we actually pose one or not? And more importantly, now that we've seen the response from that armed young man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I have to go back to the feeling that I may be hunted down like an animal and that I will simply be shot because I am involved in a protest, or maybe not even a protest. What happens when a bunch of us get together peacefully at some place like Evelyn K. Davis Park and decide that we want to have a rally for voting? Is there going to be somebody who decides, well, these people look dangerous for me, so I'm grabbing my rifle and I'm heading that direction? You know, people need to understand that when people see this kind of trauma, it affects them deep into their souls. Because it's not just that one person that was shot. It's the realization that everybody who looks like me, including myself, we may also become a victim of violence either by the state or by vigilantes. And let us be clear about this point. After that young man, shot those people, he walked by several officers who did not. He still had his weapon on him. And as he is walking down the street, you can hear people screaming and crying. He just shot people. He shot someone. And there was no reaction. And that is where justice falls short. Because if there was true justice, then that individual would have been stopped. It wouldn't matter what the color of his skin was. It wouldn't matter what's going on. He's holding a weapon. People are saying that he just shot someone. And that is part of the traumatic experience, that something can happen to any one of us and there will be no repercussions. And that leads to that fear. That leads to that reaction that we see that some people say that's inappropriate. It is because we realize that at any point in time when we become a victim, there may not be justice that follows that.
Yeah, no, when I saw the video and saw him walk by the police, the first thing I thought was if that was a black man, there's a very highly likelihood that that person is on the ground, face down, probably with a knee in his back. Instead, this 17-year-old was able to walk by, I mean, with a weapon around his chest, in a very tense situation. So, very troubling. And I'm hoping, under no uncertain terms, that every community, every politician, every organization and leader is out condemning what happened, because we cannot have that happening in our streets. When people go out and protest, whether it's young people that have been doing a good job here in Des Moines, out there raising their voices, or in Davenport or Waterloo or Omaha or any other community, or Kenosha, Wisconsin, where you wouldn't even think about these things, first of all, happening, let alone the second tragedy now that happens with the killing of 2 people and the injury of a third last night. So all of us, and including No Justice, No Peace, we're going to condemn that kind of violence against people. We're not going to support that in any way. And I'm calling on all political parties, all political leaders, all law enforcement leaders, and all people that are out on social media. They're out there using their Twitter feed or their Facebook post or Instagram or whatever it is you're doing. Make sure you go out, and no matter what you believe, what side of the aisle that you're on, you're saying that is wrong. There is no purpose for that. There is no reason. There's no way to even condone that in any way, shape, or form. And we all need to go take that and make that happen in a forceful way. Because if we don't do that, then we open the door for somebody thinking that it's okay, which is what we're at to begin with, because of the leadership that we've had at the federal level and the silence and complicity we've had of people that didn't want to speak up for almost 4 years now. That has kind of allowed a lot of this to perpetuate. And until we have people at the top, they're taking leadership, and all the other elected people doing the same, we're going to continue to have people that think that they're empowered to go do something similar.
So Eddie, you talking about the guy who says grab women by their private parts? You talking about the guy who makes fun of disabled reporters and people? You talking about the guy who told a group of white supremacists that they were very fine people? You talking about the guy who at his rallies incited violence against black people who were attending, who disagreed with some of his points, telling people to beat the mess out of him, kick him out? Is that what you're talking about?
It's not him that's the worst part of it, Rob. It's the people that didn't stand up and speak up around it. That's that kind of things that Al talked about earlier, right? So we can have a person who's misguided, who's misleading, who's taking us down a bad path. The more troubling part for me watching this over the last 3.5 years is all the other people who didn't stand up, that watched the injustice, right? You'll look at the Good Samaritan story, and it's the 3 other people that saw the same injustice and didn't stand up and help out that person that had been robbed and left for dead. They're all guilty. Not the first one, not the second one, not the third one. All of them, everybody else that followed after that, And for 3.5 freaking years, we've had so many people that have walked past, people that have been left in the ditch. And that is very, very frustrating for all of us. And for me, that's the bigger sin than what the person you described so well has been at the leader of that. You can't have a leader like that unless you have a bunch of followers that allow him to keep leading, to keep running down that path. He should have been denounced. And we dropped the ball at that. And we did that for selfish reasons that we're all going to have to come to terms with there pretty soon. We did that because our 401k looked pretty good. We did that because we liked the tax policy. We did that because we liked the regulations drop, so I was able to go out and pollute the air more. We did that because we liked some other things that were happening. I'm hoping we didn't do that because we really agreed with what he was saying, although there's a bunch of people that did agree with that and actually been empowered by that. And one of those people, a 17-year-old that drove up to Kenosha, Wisconsin yesterday and decided that he was going to take law into his own hands. And there's other people like that that we've seen around the country. We've seen around the world, right? We saw that in New Zealand. We saw that in Texas. We've seen that in other parts around this country and around the world because people haven't stood up and said that injustice is wrong. And we're not going to allow that to happen as part of this team of No Justice, No Peace. We're going to stand up. We're going to speak up. We're going to advocate. We're going to go try to change hearts and minds. That's why I asked you guys that question earlier, because we want to hear the questions. We want to allow those questions to be asked, and we want to be able to answer them and have dialogue. And we need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the problems didn't necessarily start the man who currently occupies the Oval Office. Those problems began long ago in our country, and people have been battling against them for years. And at times we have made success, and at times we have seen the needle turn back the other way. So we don't necessarily ask what's wrong with him. We knew what was wrong with him when he was running for office. What we have to ask is what is wrong with the people who saw what he did, what he said, what he was, and still supported him, despite the fact that he gave us a very clear indication of who he was, saying that all Mexicans are drug dealers and rapists. That should have been a disqualifier right there. But I will also say that true leadership actually helps bring people together in moments of crisis. True leadership does not exploit a crisis for its own ends and own means. We're seeing an individual right now who is stoking the fires of fear and hatred, and an individual who is looking at people who are different from him and saying, we must make sure that we continue to suppress, and we must make sure that we continue to put down this group of people and not let them move into our neighborhoods or be a part of our community. There is no other way that you can really point out the fact that somebody is racist when they say, we don't want them here. We should stand up and allow military forces to move into our cities in order to react to them. That is absolutely ridiculous when a sitting president of the United States decides that heavily armed forces are the best way to react to this, rather than reaching out to those who are in pain, and rather than reaching out to those who were affected by the death of George Floyd and saying to them that, I hear your anger and your concerns, and I want to work with you and I want to unite with you in order to solve these problems. But instead, what he did was talk about using violence to combat this. Having been out in certain situations where I have stood between individuals who were exercising their free right to protest and standing between those who were representing law enforcement, when law enforcement stood there and let people chant and let people scream and let people express their anger, that rarely led to conflict. I will not say that conflict never did happen, but sometimes it led to just the allowing of people to express themselves. But when they started to react violently, charge the crowd, fire tear gas, fire rubber bullets at people, that is exacerbating the situation that causes things to get even worse. So when you look at these people and you allow them to say, you know what, you do have a right to express your voice. You do have a right to stand up against what you see as injustice and to say things, then that can truly change things in America. But instead, what do? You tear gas and you attack a group of people who are protesters over by the White House just so you can get a photo op with a Bible you have probably never read in your life. That is beyond disgusting to me. And when you think about the trauma that a lot of these young people have faced, the thing that we have to ask ourselves is not just were they protesters, were they possibly acting inappropriately, but when we see individuals who are law enforcement, who are supposed to be protecting us, violently reacting, then we have to really ask ourselves, will these people ever trust law enforcement again? Will they ever trust authority again when they have seen themselves and their colleagues getting beaten, thrown to the ground, tear gassed, consistently arrested? You know, that is the question we have to ask. And do we want that trust? Well, then we have to make sure that we are not allowing individuals to react that way and violate these people and cause this trauma, which will probably last for them for the rest of their lives.
Here's what I would like to ask everybody that watches this to visit us at nojusticepac.org. We're not having this conversation just because we feel like it. We are having this conversation because somebody that looked like me was gunned down just simply because this has got to stop. Like Al said, we show up in riot gear for nonviolent protesters with cardboards and bottled water so that they don't pass out in the heat. But we let a group of white militias show up at the capital of Michigan, spit on police officers, and storm the Capitol and threaten the governor? We allowed that. So I want everybody to visit us at nojusticepac.org. And I'm going to ask you to make a donation to our cause because we need your help as we travel across not just this state, but this country to bring awareness to this stuff, to continue to fight this stuff, to continue to make this stuff at the forefront. This cannot just be a news cycle and then we're done. This cannot just be a ride the wave moment or this is, I'm cool because I can hashtag some names and I can talk some facts about black issues. No, this stuff is real. And we need your help to systematically change this. We're going around to support candidates who support our ideas because we firmly believe here at No Justice, No Peace, at the New Frontier Action Fund, that if we support the right person, they will give us the right policies so that it will help the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Pastor Brown said the other day, we can't change the policy until we change the policymakers.
That's right.
That's pretty powerful, and we need to be able to go change the policymakers so that people don't have to live in constant fear. Black people and brown people and our brothers and sisters and siblings in the LGBTQ community and others that have been treated unjustly for far too long. And we want to work hard on this issue. And we have some things that we're hopefully going to take to city council and to do some work here locally and try again to grow that from the inside out. We want to do some work at the legislative level, the state level, at the federal level. And not only do we want you to go to our website, as Rob asked, we also want to hear from you, your stories. We want to hear about the important issues that you find out there, because this is one of many that we need to talk about when we talk about injustice in our communities. We have to talk about childhood poverty, which is much larger in communities of color than anywhere else. When you talk about homelessness, and when you talk about education and economic opportunity and so much more. So we have a lot of work to do. This issue right now is at the forefront because it's been knocking on our door for many months, all summer long. We're hoping that things will quiet down over time, but we need to stay diligent. We need to continue to be asking questions. We need to continue to speak up and speak out. And as we talk about this issue, we're also going to focus on many others to bring about peace and justice in our communities.
You know, when we talk about no justice, no peace and the work that we're doing, it is not about left or right. It's not about black or white. It is about humanity, and that everybody has an equal right to a life that is filled with justice and a life that is filled with equality under the law, under your economic status, under your health care, under your mental health care, under your education. And that's what it's truly about. It's not now necessarily about supporting one party or another or one individual or another. It's about, can we make sure that all individuals see the humanity of every person that they come across, and that they advocate for policies, and that they advocate for a change in attitude? Because, you know, sometimes when we look at policies, that's not enough. It's got to be that education so that attitudes and behaviors change. And that is part of what we want to do. You know, when we look about, people have sometimes come to me and said, you know, my father went through this, my grandfather went through this, and my great-grandfather went through this. As I said before, sometimes that pendulum of justice and equality will swing the right way, and then sometimes it will swing the other way when we have the wrong policymakers in office. And all I would have to say to anybody who questions on whether we need to keep up this fight continuously is, I would say this. My mother is 83 years old. She marched often for civil justice when she was a young woman in Chicago. She marched often for women's rights. She was a very large advocate for women's rights. And for the women out there who are listening, do you feel that we've won the battle for women's rights? Or do you still feel that there are times out there when you have to face sexism and discrimination because of your sex and gender? And that is something that we still are dealing with today, and we still have to fight for today. So when we talk about there being one end-all battle for justice that will solve all of our problems, that is not what we are looking at. We're looking at that the forces out there who are comfortable in this situation, that are comfortable in this system, because it has given them a life of comfort, and it has given them a life that they feel happy with. They don't want to change, and when it does change, they want to change it back. So our mission is to never rest. As I've said before to people, when it comes to no justice, no peace, and keeping up this fight for generations beyond myself, we are not going to submit to comfort. We are not going to submit to rest, and we will not submit to the pressures of those who would continue to suppress people. That will not be what we do now or in the future. I plan to keep on fighting with my brothers Eddie and Rob Johnson and all of those who would join us in No Justice, No Peace, and decide this is not the day that we will quit, nor will be the next day, the next year, the next millennia. I'm going to make sure that when it comes to this particular fight, I'm always on target, and I always have the heart to continue. And that's why I love my fellow brothers and sisters who have joined me in this fight, because we will not end and we will not submit to those who would oppress and to those that would hold people down simply because they do not look like them.
Hey, I want to, Rob, let me jump in before I'm going to let you close it out, Rob. I just want to say really quick, I want to thank everybody for jumping on. We're going to have these pop-up conversations like this from time to time. We were talking earlier today, and I saw pain in our meeting from both these people. And I'm hoping this conversation helped them, and I'm hoping it's helping you. I'm hoping that you're out having conversations as well. That'll make us healthy. And we need to do that. We need to have dialogue. We need to let those emotions come out, come forth, let that sadness, that anger, that frustration. But then we need to figure out how we're going to bring about that justice and peace. So we'll pop up again from time to time. So be on the lookout for us as we're doing it. Hopefully we'll have more fun once in a while, but today's not a great night to have fun because There's just too many serious things going on. There's too much heartache today. But hopefully in a few days we'll be able to come on and talk about something a little bit lighter and laugh a little bit and make some jokes. And again, we want to hear from you on that. So God bless you for being here. Rob, close us out today, if you would, please.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Al, and thank you, Eddie, for this heartfelt, endured conversation. My mentor and very close friend, Dr. Amos C. Brown, one of the original freedom riders and civil rights icon and civil rights legend, just on Monday said that it was August 28th, 1955, where he, at a young age, he picked up a magazine called the Jet magazine, and he looked at it, and it was the mutilated face of a young boy by the name of Emmett Till, who had been beaten severely and killed because two white men lied and said that he whistled at a white woman. Dr. Brown began to explain to us that he got involved because he saw that, and that man looked like him. For some of you, you've gotten involved because you saw George Floyd, and George Floyd looked like your brother, your father, your friend, or someone that you may be close to. And so I urge you to find your place in this fight. Your place may not be protesting. You may be creative. You may be a writer. Wherever you find yourself, whatever gifts you have, it can be used in this space. We love you. We appreciate you. We thank you for joining us. And please go to nojusticepact.org so that we can continue this fight. We have to do this together. And there can truly be no peace if there is no justice. Have a good night, everyone.